that some people lately are saying that, like, kind of like what you were saying, instead of it all being about human rights as just like sentences that we all need to live by in a book or something, they say that there has to be a whole consciousness, like a whole new way of thinking, especially now that such a globalized society and all the countries are linking up. It's like vital that everyone has this global consciousness or whatever. So what would be the best way to, you know, make everyone good people? Like, how is that done? How are people educated so that they feel the right feelings towards each other? You know.
I'll ask you how you think that should be done. There are lots of concepts of globalisation and global consciousness. There's an idea that we all meet somewhere in cyberspace, on the internet, and there's a global consciousness happening there. And I mean, it's a very serious thing that this is going on. First of all, I think human rights education should be prescriptive. We know enough about other things in our schools. I think human rights education should be part of the syllabus. I think it should be taken as a serious part of the syllabus. When I go around the world, it's done as sort of an additionality. We have to do citizenship, but people aren't examining it. I think if you look at the history of the Universal Declaration, you have inputs from France, yes, the United States, yes, but also China, into the Declaration. They try to get to a global norm. We can try again and again and again, but there seems to be, at the core of humanity, the idea that there is you talk about interconnectedness. I would say, as a religious person, that interconnectedness is we're all created in the same image. God is, you shouldn't desecrate God, therefore you shouldn't desecrate humanity. There has to be a humanitarian mechanism in it too. That's the way I best understand it. Therefore, I can't, if I have a potential to have a relationship, to love, to just interact with a person, I don't really want them to starve, I don't want to kill them, I want to accept their humanity. And so I do think we need to educate ourselves, first of all, about human rights, but second of all, about the communities that we live around us. Because otherwise we're denying their humanity. I don't know if that helps. I think the idea of one global consciousness, I go around the world for my job. I was on an island in Tunisia last week. Their social, they have different cultural and social norms than they do here in Dublin, than they do where I live in Paris, which is different from where I live in the south of England. Everything's slightly so different. I'll tell you, one thing we did for the CRE, my last bit on this, was everywhere we went, we were told one thing. I went to Riot, I went to a place in Wrexham, where the asylum service put 400 Kurds in the States and Wales and Wrexham, which is 99% white. They ended up in a race riot over a paint pot. They thought the asylum seekers were getting their flats painted. And they sat around the table and they realised that nobody was getting paint. And then when the two communities realised nothing was happening, they turned to the local council and the police and said, "I own the painting on the state." But wherever we go, whether it be Wrexham or Birmingham or Manchester, it was, things are different here. You don't understand them. They're different. They're the same everywhere else, but they're different here. Of course they're different here. Everywhere has the generic, they also have the specific. I don't know if that helps.
In relation to the sort of wager between particularism and universalism, what is your sort of view on how the shift which came with the multicultural move in terms of the hardening and reification of difference? So something like the North, where we make it law what community one is a part of, and the effects of that. Does that make sense to the question?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I know it's sort of a nice one.
Yeah. I was trying to dance my way out of that. You probably noticed. We are all brought up in situ. We all have values. Some of those values belong to something called community. Community tends to be important. And in Canada, for instance, upholds within its constitution different people's rights, different linguistic rights, and also indigenous rights, seen as terribly important. And why is that important? Because the majority population, historically, we don't have to blame this generation, go back 100 years, didn't recognise those rights, did probably terrible things to native populations and things like that. So yes, upholding those rights is important. You're talking about the North, where you had an inbuilt, you've had example, we're not going to get through the whole history, but there is discrimination and employment in resources, and those communities had strong identities. When you're trying to create peace between communities, first of all you have to recognise the other, which goes back to what Uber was saying, it's a be and do thing. I have to recognise you as you. And I think that if you have that inbuilt sometimes in legislation, it can help the process forward. Where it won't have is where you start saying, we have two communities, you're allowed in Northern Ireland you have a human rights society trying to be created. I know one community likes one community relates more to the human rights campaign than another. But you have a situation up there whereby you're saying these are two communities that have different histories, different culture, maybe different language, etc., different religion. We recognise all that. Now recognise each other. How do you build a common future together based on human rights? That's the whole model used in the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. That's the whole model used in the Equality Authority over there. Is from there, from where we are today, how do you build a society or a tent together? So they're saying, look, the pillars, if you like, are our communities. And it's quite interesting talking to the Chinese community in Belfast. Why? Because, the old Jewish communities get smaller and smaller, but where do you fit into all this? This is why I talked about the third tribe. Are you the casual observer on the outside? Are you the person that the other two communities asked to take sides? Or are you a third community which gets treated, has discrimination against it because you're neither nor? And so speak to the Chinese community, because they've been campaigning for their rights for years and they haven't under the Northern Ireland Civil. So I think by recognising that those communities exist and they have rights to exist, once you say that they're equal to one another and you want to show individual human rights towards everyone and you can't discriminate in terms of employment and services and etc., then you're going somewhere. If you say there are two communities living side by side and one is superior to the other, Nazi Germany, let's say it's a black and white situation, isn't it? The Aryans and the Jews, and then you've got genocide on your hands, and you're not too many steps away. Or apartheid South Africa, where you have white community and a black community. You start having a hierarchy. You have a hierarchy of communities, and then before you say there's one that's better than the other, legally speaking, which is a situation last year. That's going to be wrong, because what you've done is you said, okay, there are two communities. I see one better than the other. I have no human rights. I don't recognise everybody as equal, and therefore, when hell breaks loose. In terms of Nazism, you see some pseudo-social Darwinist nonsense, racism as part of their general thing. Again, in apartheid South Africa. So you can quickly go down that road unless you blend community rights with human rights. You're shaking your head at me, as though I've said something terrible.
No, so the current version it solves the problem, which is, which you alluded to, which is third tribes, which is if you are a religion before and you have privileges or group rights, you then created and instantiated inequality on top. Which I think is the French.
If I'm okay, I'll try this again. I'll try one more time. If I'm a Quebecois Canadian and I want all information in French, or Canadian French, a fantastic word, chien chaud, which is not hot dog in French. So there's Canadian culture. Does that mean I have a right as a community, or does it mean that I have my community identity recognised as an individual? I think it's the latter. I think it's the latter. No one's giving a group of people rights, except when it came to that genocide question of returning the property to the people who are closest to you in the village. So if it's religion, race, whatever, it's quite easy to do. But I think that what it's trying to do is say, actually we recognise there are different communities here and we're not going to discriminate on the basis that you are a French speaker, or that you are white, or that you are black, or that you are Jewish, or Muslim, or Jedi, or whatever it is.
I'm going to phrase this question in terms of a borrowed term from ecologists, conservational hotspot, whereby if you sort of concentrate your efforts around a particular area or level of the question, you might gain quite a lot for if you like, for the added totality. So basically my question would be, I would see women's rights as one of this hotspot issue for communities, and it's topical to Ireland, I guess, because it's an ongoing process of people from various communities gathering around various women's issues to put pressure on government and so on. What I'm getting at, I guess, is that, I mean, a lot of communities heretofore have difficulties in recognizing difference within, and that particularly often happens to hit women or, you know, certain minorities within communities hardest. So how is Britain doing in terms of or how do you think are we doing on human rights as communities, so as to get to recognize difference within communities, to bring the fruits of that recognition into our dialogue with other communities and so on? Is it happening?
How do I think Britain's doing on gender discrimination?
I mean, because there are, to name women groups.
Historically, there's no question, gender discrimination is huge. There are glass ceilings that are still being broken, which in the 21st century they shouldn't be. Those glass ceilings, those wage ceilings exist in other definitions. We could study on the basis of race. So we took somebody and say, okay, you're going to mix to somebody of the same gender, but same gender, same qualification, similar geography. So there wasn't a north-south disparity in wages, and looked at their salary level based on race alone. We found Asian and black communities in Britain, people in those communities would pay slightly less for the same level of qualification in life and jobs. So that exists. But you're right, women are paid less, and it's not acceptable. And when you're looking at discrimination, often you have double discrimination for a start. So you can get discriminated. You may be women, you may be gay, you may be from minority religion, you may be from you can get multiple. And that's being recognised more. What is happening in Britain at the moment is there is a debate over the hierarchy of rights. Who's more discriminated? On a weird level, this ended up as a chat with somebody who's I think, secured a candidacy in Parliament in the UK. And I said, I can never stand for it. I don't know if I can stand for it, I'm sure I should. I said, do you think they'd elect a candidate or any one of these stand in the UK? Or seat term? And she was, the obvious answer was, well, isn't gold was green and I'm a Jewish area. I mean, that's not really an acceptable answer. Can I go to, I was quite Golden Regis, I don't know if anyone knows what Golden Regis is, but it's bland, it's 80% whatever, white Anglo-Saxon. So, can I stand in Golden Regis? And so I was telling her about all this in this debate. She goes, I never realised that religion or race was an issue. I only thought gender was. And we had this interesting dialogue. I think gender is still a huge, I think gender is a huge, but also within certain communities, those who feel discriminated, some communities that feel discriminated because they're minority, you have an internal debate about the role of women and gender. And in traditional communities, there are women's groups who are fighting to be heard within their community leadership. And so we go round and round in circles. My identity is multiple. I'm the third tribe. Am I a Catholic, Jew, or Protestant? I'm not going to ask the question. But the reality is that I have an Irish passport, I have a British passport. I am Jewish, I'm proud of that. I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm a chaplain, I'm an Arsenal supporter. We've all got problems in life. But it's, and these multiple identities matter to me, including the last one, which I joke about. It matters to me. There's a group in London called the Muslim Jewish Arsenal Tottenham Group. And they meet, some serious Channel 4 producer that belongs to that. And they meet and they discuss issues of the day. And the reason they meet like that is because Arthur was Arsenal, but not necessarily the same heart. And so, where does my identity come from? I don't, and you're a man. I don't know your identity, your ethnicity and all that, but again, certain issues come up, and at that moment in time, that issue relates to your heritage, maybe your ethnicity, maybe the fact that you're a woman, maybe the fact that you live in Dublin. Don't live in Dublin. Maybe you've come from New Zealand today, what do I know? But it relates to that. At my university, my Jewish society, we have a Jewish society. All of a sudden, we've got lots of Hungarians. There's a right-wing, far-right party that's backing the government. And so the Jewish society does all this Jewish bagels and Friday night dinners, and they tend to eat. That's what Jewish societies do. But you've got this crowd of people, not around the corner, it's a quite big crowd, who are talking in Hungarian about Hungarian politics. It's not what Jewish society is necessarily about. It's what they need right now because of the rise of the majority party, which is anti-Semitism. They need to talk about her, and they feel they need to talk about it together. If you asked me 10 years ago, I imagine I'm sitting in a room full of Hungarian students talking about Hungarian politics. I'd probably say no, but things happen.
Just a question on education. It strikes me that the one thing all these communities would have in common, say in a big city like London, where you have their children will be in education to the age of 12 or maybe 14. Is there anything you can do to encourage tolerance across communities by introducing, say, an educational module for all schools for children at that young age?
Sorry,